Welcome back to another episode of Show Us Your Rolex. This is where you submit photos of your Rolex, and that gives me a chance to talk about someone else's watch for a change and give my opinions. In this episode, I asked to see either your most recent or your most worn Rolex. So I'll start out with my submissions first. My most worn Rolex of all time has to be this white dial Datejust 16200 that I purchased new from the authorized dealer in 2003. Even though I currently don't wear this very often, if you add up the time on wrist, this has to be my most worn because this was my very first Rolex, and for a very long time I owned only two Rolex, this one and the Submariner date. This is the most simple and classic Rolex that I could find in the display case that still had the Cyclops date window. It's all stainless steel with an all brushed bracelet, and it has a classic white dial with stick markers and an outer chapter ring. Nothing fancy here, just a very simple Rolex, very lightweight on the wrist, and it doesn't stand out, and this served me very well over time, so I still have a very soft spot in my heart for this watch. My most recent Rolex is the current reference white gold Daytona, and this is such a difference between my very first Rolex and my last Rolex. This is solid white gold and it feels very substantial on the wrist, and it's 40 millimeters, but it still wears well because of the shape of the case. It has similarities to some of the other Daytona models, but put together there's nothing like this in the current catalog. It has a metal bezel like the old stainless steel Daytona, and this gives it a kind of vintage look to it, but this bezel is made of solid white gold. It has a white gold case like the Oyster Flex model, but this one has a full solid white gold bracelet. It has solid chronograph subdials like the Le Mans, but these subdials are made in steel. So overall, this watch is very well put together, and I still feel like this is a subdued watch. And I saved some money by purchasing this watch from the AD just before the massive price hike of January 1st. The first submission I want to review is this Datejust from Aaron. This really caught my eye, and I was just fascinated by the configuration of this Datejust. He writes, I recently acquired a Datejust 36 and wanted your thoughts on it for the video. This is my first Rolex, and so consequently it's my most worn Rolex. So I agree that a Datejust 36 is a perfect choice for a very first Rolex, especially one with a smooth bezel and an oyster bracelet. The oyster bracelet is easily worn with a casual outfit, but it can also be worn in a formal setting. But the Jubilee bracelet is a little bit more difficult to wear casually. Same thing with the non-fluted bezel. This is also more casual, but it also brings down the cost of the watch significantly. So currently a Datejust 36 with a domed bezel and oyster bracelet is priced at $7,550. But choosing the same watch with a Jubilee bracelet and a white gold fluted bezel will cost you $9,250 at retail, which is significantly more. But what really caught my eye about this watch was the dial configuration. I usually see the Wimbledon dial paired with a two-tone variation in yellow gold or rose gold, or if it's a steel version, I usually see it on the Jubilee bracelet. But I think this is the first time I've seen the Wimbledon dial on an all-steel oyster bracelet, and I think it looks good. It looks a little bit more unique to me. But I would be a little bit more conservative with a first Datejust, and I would go with an all-black dial or blue dial or white dial with the stick hour markers. But that's all just personal preference, and I think overall this was a very good pickup. The next submission is from Stuart with a great picture along with his newest acquisition, the Submariner 124060. He wrote, reached out to my AD on my birthday with a message of, hey, it's my birthday and I'm feeling lucky. Any chance of an Explorer 2 or a sub available? I was able to have it on my wrist the next day. So that's great news. I'm sure you've had some prior purchase history, but that does give us hope that the Rolex Steel sports watches are becoming more available. Similar to my story where I walked in and they brought out a brand new Submariner from the back. A Submariner is always great to have as a casual watch, and I love wearing it on the weekend. The classic black bezel and no Cyclops window gives this an extra clean look to it. They make fewer pieces of the no date sub compared to the Submariner date, but it's also in much less demand. So if you're looking for a new Submariner, I would consider the one without the date. I never get tired of looking at a Submariner. You could look at a Tudor Black Bay or an Omega Seamaster, but the original Submariner never gets old and it will always be a classic. Next up is F3245 with a great pickup, the stainless steel Daytona with the white dial. He writes, here's a pic of my Daytona. I bought it back in 2015 different times. Believe it or not, I walked in through my AD and he had it in stock. Was a gift to myself as a birthday present. First Daytona and Rolex. What is special to me is I like to wear it on my rubber B strap, make it more sporty. This must have been very shortly after its release, so this was a very smart pickup before all the hype with the stainless steel Daytona. It was still very difficult to get when it was first released, but even more difficult now. But sadly, I think the stainless steel Daytona with the white dial has now become more of a status piece. I agree that the rubber B strap tones it down and makes it look more like a sports watch, but I think it looks much better on the original stainless steel bracelet. So I would just proudly wear this with the original bracelet. And no one would be able to tell if it was a 2016 model or a 2023 model. Next is Salim with his stainless steel 36mm Datejust with the green dial on a Jubilee bracelet. I got my Datejust after a waiting period of exactly 1 year in 2024. I had never bought anything from this AD before, and even though it is a large and well-known jeweler, the sales staff were normal and nice and not over the top, and I was the same. Anyway, I've had my Datejust with the mint green dial for almost a year now, and I look forward to putting it on my wrist every morning. The green color is really beautiful and well done and not too saturated, and that is exactly what I like. It was definitely the right decision for me, and I really enjoy wearing this watch. It looks like your patience paid off this time, waiting a year and getting the mint green Datejust. I think the 36mm size looks great on your wrist. A lot of people underestimate 36mm, but I think it looks great on most wrists. The domed bezel is not as popular as the fluted bezel, so this may be a little bit easier to get from the AD, and it's also less expensive than the fluted bezel. I'm sure the pictures don't do justice to this green dial, and I'm sure it looks much better in person, but I'm still not completely sold on the green dial for a daily watch. I'm not sure if it would match every outfit that I have or if I could wear this as a daily watch, but I would only really know if I had this in person and tried it out. But as you said, if it's not oversaturated and not too bright, and if it works with your lifestyle, then that's great. Next up is JG with another green dial watch, the Submariner Date. Looks like we've had a lot of Submariners, Daytonas, and Datejusts on this episode. This is my oldest Rolex. I've owned it since 2011. I've had it serviced after 10 years of ownership and probably wore it half a dozen times in 3 years. I've been wearing it as much as possible in the last few months and fallen in love with it all over again. Goes to show that a break from a favorite watch can do you good. It's a hobby to be enjoyed over a lifetime. And that's a great point. If you're getting tired of one of your watches and you find you're not wearing it very often, don't sell it right away. Just put it away for 3 to 6 months. And then after putting it back on, you might find that you missed the watch and have a new appreciation for it. That's happened to me several times. I put away a watch for a while, and when I put it back on, it feels like getting a new watch. And if your Rolex is scratched up or beat up, I wouldn't hesitate to send it in to the Rolex Service Center. Getting it back into restored condition and putting it back on also feels like you're getting a new watch. Next up is Frank V with his collection of watches and his collection of fountain pens. There's 2 Sea Dwellers, one in two-tone and one in stainless steel, and a stainless steel Sky Dweller with the blue dial. A good variety of watches here, also some Breitling and Omega and Panerai, and the Seikos in a different box. You've got a bigger wrist size than I do, so you can handle those Sea Dwellers and Sky Dweller, but I couldn't really wear those with my small wrist. That's a nice pair of Sea Dwellers, and I do like that two-tone Sea Dweller, and that blue dial on the Sky Dweller is amazing. I can't identify the Speedmaster on the bottom, but that strap looks great on that watch. Also can't identify all the fountain pens, but there's some Lamy on the top left box and a couple Mont Blanc in the top right box. I also have Mont Blanc and Lamy pens, but I end up just using my Lamy Safari most of the time. It's just easy to use and smooth, and it's been my go-to pen for a while now. And next is David with his white gold Daytona on Oyster Flex, another great looking watch. I know you have some other watches, but this watch really complements your other ones, and it really fits into your collection. I think you have a good variety of watches right now, and I wouldn't really sell any of one of them. The size looks good on the wrist, and I think you could wear this on a large variety of occasions. The Oyster Flex bracelet really comes down to personal preference. I've heard some people rave about how comfortable it is, and it's the most comfortable bracelet out there. And I've heard some other people say that it's not so comfortable on their wrist and it digs into their wrist. So it really just comes down to your particular wrist, and it would be really helpful to try it on before you could buy it. They gave the Daytona a special treatment this year with their usual price increases, and they really hiked up the prices on the gold Daytonas extra high this time. I'm not sure why. I think it was more than just the increase in the price of gold this year. I think they wanted to differentiate the Daytona with its chronograph function from the GMT Master 2 with its GMT function. And I think they also want to increasingly make the Daytona a more exclusive piece. He also got a nice pen from Rolex as a gift from the AD. I've never received a pen like this from Rolex. I have gotten a pen from Vacheron, and from Rolex I've received a ball cap, a mouse pad, and a travel pouch. I've never really asked for anything extra, but I'm wondering, have you bought a new Rolex, and have you actually asked for an extra gift, or is that just bad manners? But anyways, thanks again to everyone that submitted their photos for this episode. This is a recurring series on my channel, so if you want to be included in the next episode, just keep an eye out on my community page. I'll usually announce the episode a few days before it airs.